What's going on, everyone? My name is Priyag Jithani. I'm an MD-MBA student here at Yale University. I will be matching into internal medicine in March of this year, so I'm about to graduate. And obviously, I'm a YouTuber that makes a lot of videos related to productivity and medicine. So today, many of you may actually know me because I created a lot of Anki videos back when I was a first, second, and third year because that's what I was using to study. Now that I just finished my business school and I also have done most of my clinical rotations, most people think that Anki is literally only used to study for board exams. However, to this day, I have still continued to use Anki, but it's not in the way that you think. I don't actually do flashcards every day. Instead, I use Anki as my knowledge repository that includes a ton of information. And I can tell you that it is very underutilized in this regard, and I just wanted to share with you some of the ways that you can be using Anki to supplement your knowledge repositories, and also the fact that it's not only for like step one and step two, and it's not only useful if you use them to do the flashcards. It's actually very useful even if you don't do flashcards every day, which is what I do now. I don't do any flashcards. I purely use Anki as a way to stay up to date, and every now and then refresh my memory, but I'm actually usually adding more cards to it than actually doing cards. So now let's just go through some of these ways. I'm going to go through 5, and then at the end, I will do an overview and actually show you my Anki, of course. So here's the first way that I use Anki now. I'm done with step 1, I'm done with step 2, and so I actually use Anki now a lot for conferences. And this could be virtual conferences, which has been the case during COVID-19, but there are also conferences that were in person for a little bit. So in 2021, I went to the HLTH conference, the health conference. In 2021, Stat News, which is one of the best news organizations for medicine and biotech, had a conference that was virtual, and so did Forbes. Forbes also had a healthcare conference that was virtual. I was lucky enough to attend all 3 of these conferences, and while I was there, one of the things that I did is I would often watch the summit videos, and as I was watching them, I would take notes on different things that people would be saying. And then I would come home and transcribe those notes onto Anki so I could actually remember them going forward. For the virtual conferences, I would actually just have the notes right then and there because the video was going and I could just take notes as I'm listening to like very renowned speakers in healthcare. How does this actually help? Well, you'll see that I don't actually do any of the cards. It just helps because one, now down the road, if I hear of any of these people like Hemant Taneja or, for example, the CEO of Mayo Clinic, I can actually look up these people in my Anki deck and actually see like, hey, you sound so familiar. Where have I heard you before? I can refresh myself, and next time, if our paths were to cross, I can at least say like, hey, I remember you talked at this summit. And it really just serves as an intangible asset to be able to connect over these things. Not to mention, every now and then, if I have times, I do actually do some of these cards purely to kind of refresh my memory on what it is that certain people are doing that's super interesting. So that's the first one. What's the next thing that I'm doing? I now use Anki for a lot of deep dive articles. After you're done with step 1 and step 2, you'll know that learning never really stops in medicine, and you may actually get JAMA papers, you're going to get any GM papers, you're going to get papers related to reviews about certain topics. When your mentors send those to you, it's cool to just read it and say I read it, but it's even cooler to say you read it and then you actually were able to make cards about it. And that way, if this paper ever comes up again, it's right here. This is your knowledge repository. Everything is here, right? So you'll see that I actually create a lot of COVID articles. Anytime I read COVID news, I kind of create, overviews related to it. I also do a lot on business, right? I read a lot of articles related to investing. I read a lot of articles related to entrepreneurship. Every now and then I come across an article that I say, hey, I don't want to forget this. And down the road, if someone else has a question about the growth mindset or what it's like building a portfolio or the fundamentals of investing, in each of these flashcards, I actually include a ton of sources of where I got information, and I can refer people to it. Again, a great intangible asset that can be that Anki can be utilized for. Now let's talk about number 3. What's the third thing I use Anki for? I use it a lot, actually, for documentaries. Every now and then, I come across a documentary. I love documentaries that I really enjoy. Obviously, while I'm watching it, I'm not taking notes on Anki. But what I do is after the documentary is done, if there's something interesting to be learned from it, for example, Michael Phelps made a documentary called The Weight of Gold that is all about the mental health struggles of Olympic athletes. There's also another documentary about what actually happened on 9/11 and the story leading up to it. these are both educational for me, and I personally think I learned a lot during those documentaries. So what I do after watching them is just go through the Wikipedia page and just try to remember the main points and make notes about them. Again, these are notes. I don't actually do these cards, but I do them purely to make sure that I know that, hey, I've watched this before, and anytime in the future, if something comes up, I know where to refer to. I even also include like fun lectures. So whenever I, for example, learn about tech news, I include like random notes about tech news I put in here. I also include like different things I learn through like Yale that is linked with fun lectures. Like for example, Joe Tsai, who is the co-founder of Alibaba, came back to Yale and gave a bunch of lectures related to crypto, and he also has the Brooklyn Nets. So he talked about like the sports industry. And while I was listening to those lectures, I was like, this is so interesting, and I don't really want to forget some of this information. So I'm just gonna like write a bit about it on my Anki cards, and that way down the road I can say like, oh, that's what I learned from Joe Tsai, right? Like super cool. Now let's talk about the fourth thing that I use Anki for. I use it a lot for books. Um, for those of you who don't read already, I used to never be a big reader. I got more into reading during my fourth year of medical school because I had a bit more time. And I can tell you I regret not reading earlier. It's definitely a good thing to do and like to educate yourself. And so whenever I'm reading, and I don't actually physically read, I listen to a lot of audiobooks purely because whenever I read, I actually fall asleep. Like it's the best way to put me to sleep if you give me a physical book. But if I'm listening to an audiobook, I can do it when I'm at the gym, when I'm running. I can do it when I'm taking a walk. I can do it when I'm like feeling like just kind of like I don't want to do much. And as I'm reading these audiobooks, the good part is it's all on my iPhone. So whenever I come across a good quote or a good sentence in a book that I'm listening to, I make a note. So you can actually double tap your iPhone and say, "Hey Siri, make a note." And when you say that, Siri will actually make a note related to whatever it is you want to say, and it will save it. And then at the end of the week, I actually turn all of these notes into flashcards. I don't usually do those flashcards. I only keep them there so I know what the book was referring to. So down the road, if the book comes up again, I know where to look for it, right? Very fascinating. I still do this, and believe it or not, this whole book chapter is much, much longer in my Anki deck now. And last but not least, perhaps the last thing I use Anki a lot for is whenever I take classes. I take a ton of classes on Coursera, and I take a ton of classes on Skillshare. The whole point of classes is to learn. And as I said, anytime I want to learn something, I put it into Anki. And sometimes I actually do a lot of these flashcards. And I do them, again, because I want to learn something. But even if I don't do them, I know that they're there, so I can actually like learn from them, right? So anytime I take a class, I don't make too many flashcards, but I make a few purely for the sake of making sure I've covered my bases. So those are the 5 ways I still use Anki to this day, and I encourage all of you to as well. I know a lot of med students delete Anki right after they take step 1 and step 2. I would encourage you to not do that because I think it's just an excellent repository of information for me right now, including my tech side, my business side, and especially my medical side. So now let me actually show you my Anki firsthand so you can kind of see some of these things in action. All right, so you can now see this is my actual Anki, and I get to show you firsthand exactly what I'm referring to. So the first part is that notice that as a medical student, I still do have those decks that every medical student should have, which is, within my clerkship deck, I included a lot of the clinical decks. Within my Step 2 CK, I have all of the Step 2 CK decks that help you study for Step 2 CK. And then I also have my preclinical decks, which include a lot of the things that you need for Step 1. Right, so these are the basics that most med students have. But notice that after I finished Step 1 and Step 2, I didn't really stop adding things to Anki because I just saw it as such a great, powerful tool. So you can see that even within residency, I've already started adding in a few papers and some notes that I'm taking based on papers. I added a few notes based on applying for residency. I had a lot of seminars, and during those seminars, there was a lot of great information that was shared, and I kind of used that. Similarly, you can see I also have a few papers from New England Journal here. And so I'm not going to stop in residency even. I think residency is going to be a place where I'll keep adding things on. But notice I even have one for my sub-I as well as thesis. So all of this to say, even anytime I do something academic, such as even with my MBA, I still take a lot of notes. But now let's focus on the part where I was showing you outside of school, what am I doing? Well, outside of school, you can see that I have so much stuff related to personal learning. And within personal learning, this is the part I was telling you about books, right? A lot of unique books and this aspect of taking notes on those books. And I have a lot more notes I haven't even added on yet that are on my phone related to tons of other books that I'm hoping to update this with. You can see that within business, I'm always doing a lot of personal learning about venture capital and investing. You can see this is the conferences section that I was referring to. There's a lot on Coursera. Every now and then I learn things about cryptocurrency, and I add that here, digital health, a documentary, fun lectures. There's just a lot here, and you can see that I don't just stop um, with anything. Anything I think is meaningful and could be useful to me long term, I add it into my Anki purely for the sake of like looking out for who I want to be in the future. So all that to say, hopefully this expanded your realm of the ways you can utilize Anki. You don't have to always do flashcards to learn things. You can learn things and just have them stored here and come back to them later. And that in and of itself is a huge thing that most people don't do. So with that being said, I hope you all found this helpful. If you did, drop a like, comment, share, subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.